Welcome to the LA Soccer Hub Show. My name is Gio Garcia. Today is Monday, December 14th. The MLS season has come to an end. You had Columbus Crew beat the Seattle Sounders 3-0 in an incredible, dominating fashion that I don't think anybody else expected this. We all expected Seattle to come bounce back and, make it more of a competitive match, but it looked like the Crew just had the whole game from start to finish. And shout out to Lucas Celeryan. He had an incredible game, couple passes, a beautiful a third goal that it just pretty much sealed the deal for the Columbus Crew. But we also got CCL News, and to help me talk all of that, we got Alicia Rodriguez. Alicia, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
Pretty good, pretty good. Like I said, MLS season is done, but we still got some soccer to talk about. In this never-ending year of 2020, we still got one more, or potentially more games, depending how LAFC does.
Yeah, it's definitely the most unorthodox season to date. So, I mean, in some ways, it's exciting that we still have some CCL to cap off the year. I think in some ways, it's sort of fitting, but we'll see how it goes because obviously, this is all new territory for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And especially with like a lot of different, some of the rosters for 2021 being named ahead of the CCL matchup. So I know it's made it difficult for not just LAFC, for other teams, MLS teams, moving forward. But let's talk about the MLS Cup. What do you think about the Columbus Crew's performance, and what do you think about Seattle Sounders, the way they played?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a surprise, like you said. I certainly expected the Sounders to be favorites coming in, and their stars just really didn't show up on the night. And Columbus's did. Like you said, Ryan was fantastic. Absolutely wonderful performance. And Nicolas Ladero, who I thought was the MVP this season, he was strangely muted on the night and just had an off night. And to me, I think overall that's kind of what made the difference. I think we're still in a time in MLS where the biggest players, when they show up, they usually determine the outcome of games, and when they don't, their teams suffer, and that's what we saw, I think, in the MLS Cup final.
Yeah, it was definitely surprising because I was always like, okay, 2-0. I've seen this story before. I know Seattle's going to bounce back. We saw what they did with Minnesota. But, hearing some of the interviews and some of the articles on Minnesota, some of the players, they say they ran out of gas. And Columbus Crew looked like they never ran out of gas. They just kept going, adding the pressure and just dominating the home game. So it was because I know a lot of people were rooting for Columbus Crew, and they were excited. A lot of MLS people. But on the other hand, I never saw Seattle Sounders to go the way they went 3-0. What do you think about Brian Schmitzer future with the Sounders? Do you think he'll come back? Do you think he may look to other possibilities like the LA Galaxy or other teams? What are your initial thoughts?
I would be surprised if Brian Spetzer went elsewhere. He's, I think, more than any other person in MLS, he's really uh, intertwined with a given market. Obviously, he grew up in Seattle. He played for the Sounders in the NASL days. He coached them in the USL days. Now he was the assistant coach in MLS, and now he's been the head coach for several years and been very successful. I know he was talking a little bit heading into the game. He doesn't have a contract so far for next season, and he was kind of talking about if he went somewhere else, maybe he'd get the respect he deserves. But I think that was kind of just idle chatter, frankly. I really would be surprised if he went to another team. I just really don't see it. Um, I also think that likely what would happen is unless the Sounders really went off a cliff, I think he probably will go out on his own terms. So if he wants to continue with the Sounders, I think he probably will. I think he's deserved that right. He keeps getting the team into MLS Cup, so that's something that you really can't overstate. It's pretty significant, and I think probably he'll have the opportunity to say when he wants to hang it up and retire, and then I think he would go out into the sunset. I don't expect him to come to LA. I don't expect him to go really anywhere else. But you never know. We'll have to see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, and I think the owners who own the Seattle Sounders also own the Seattle Seahawks. And from what I know about the ownership, just from watching the NFL, they're not ownership that typically likes to dish out money when it comes to players or certain things. And talking to Kevin Baxter, it's not just so much about Brian Smitzer's contract. It's also about his coaching staff. That's what Kevin Baxter has told me. So he wants his coaching staff to be taken care of, and I think those are some of the negotiations that are kind of the kind of butting heads. I understand it's 2020, but when you have a head coach who's been what in the MLS Cup final in four of the last 5 years, you know, you don't let someone like that walk away, right? And if he's not happy and they're not happy, there is opportunities elsewhere, like obviously the LA Galaxy, other teams around the league. But to me, LA Galaxy is the biggest name out there, and I don't think LA Galaxy would be shy to dish out that money if Brian Schmetzer does become available. So I think from talking to Kevin, if his coaching staff gets taken care of, obviously he comes back. But if he doesn't, then the most likelihood of him leaving Seattle does potentially become a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, obviously anything happens. I think it's there's a good chance that Gonzalo Pineda, an assistant coach for Seattle, will be a head coach somewhere else for 2021. I think that's more likely than Brian Schmetzer himself leaving Seattle and coaching another MLS team. I know Pineda had been connected to DC United's opening, and I know that there had been some pundits in the media who had talked about Pineda. He would be an ideal candidate for the Galaxy. Too. I don't know if they've been interviewing him or even really looked at him. But yeah, I think we'll see what happens on that front. But another assistant that the Sounders have is Preki. Of course, he's had a history of head coaching in MLS, and I don't think he's going to be a head coach again, frankly. He's somebody who burns hot and then burns those bridges, and I don't really see another MLS team taking the plunge with him. So we'll see what happens. I think there could be some changes in the Sounders staff, but again, I think it's more likely that there's going to be an assistant coach who goes to another team than Schmetzer going to a different team.
Yeah. No, I definitely see that going on. So moving forward, obviously we got LAFC going against Cruz Azul. This is, I think, to me is more interesting because you got stories on both sides, right? So we'll start with Cruz Azul, which is obviously the biggest. Their head coach Siboldi decided to resign ahead of the CCL matchup. They had an embarrassing exit in the LigaMX. They were up there in the LigaMX. They played two legs. So in the first leg they were up 4-0, and then the second leg they lost 4-0 because of Pumas. They were able to advance because I think they were the higher seed. So that, it's an embarrassing loss to lose that way when you're up 4-0 and lose the same way you won. And I was shocked that he decided to resign. He did it on Twitter, and all these different things that came out. And on top of that, you already had 12 cases for Cruz Azul. You had three players and 9 coaching and staff. So one of them is a starter, Jesus Corona. This was last week, so I don't know what the cases are this week. The COVID cases, I haven't really gotten information if Cruz Azul, if those players are going to be available. I guess the good thing for them, it was 9 coaching and staff, and only 1 starter, which is the goalkeeper. I think with the goalkeeper you can kind of get away with it. What do you make of this news of Cruz Azul, the head coach, and everything going on with them?
Well, I'm not entirely shocked that the coach has gone, just based on the fact how badly they choked in the playoffs. I mean, that's one of those, like, can you really come back from it? What surprised me was that it happened several days after that loss, and it wasn't just like that night or the next morning or whatever. So that's, I think, probably put their preparations behind a little bit for CCL, and that potentially gives LAFC an opportunity that they maybe otherwise would not have had to the same extent if the coaching staff is in disarray. I believe the U20 coach is going to lead them in CCL. And it can go both ways, right? Like, on the one hand, the players for Cruz Azul could step up and try not to, leave the last taste in their mouth this season, being that horrible loss in the playoffs, or they could be completely demoralized and just want to end it and not really show up for this game against LAFC. So it could go either way, but I think obviously coming into it for LAFC, having your opponent be in considerable disarray would seem to give you an opportunity to get an upset and to continue on in the competition.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think things are starting to break LAFC's way. With Cruz Azul, because to me, I kind of wonder how motivated is Cruz Azul after having that embarrassing exit, and then on top of that, your coach leaves, and then you got some COVID cases, and then you got to travel outside the country, go to a bubble. Be away from your family just a couple days, a couple weeks away from Christmas, the holidays and everything. So we'll have to see what happens with Cruz Azul. But I think on the other hand, LAFC, it's breaking their way. But there's also things within LAFC that we don't know yet. We were on the press call. Bob Bradley said that I believe it was last Thursday that Brian Rodriguez was coming in that night. He didn't elaborate. The team didn't elaborate if the other three international players were already there or not. So that's kind of still question in the air. But you and I were talking pre-chat. We assumed that Rossi, Cifuentes, and Palacios are already there, and they may have been, Brian Rodriguez may have been dealing with different COVID stuff. That may be the issue. Obviously, we don't know for a fact. And we also know that BWP it's not with LAFC. BWP decided to opt out because LAFC did not decide to pick up his player option for 2021. So what do you make of that news, and what do you make about BWP opting out?
Yeah, and on the COVID front, obviously anyone can test positive at any time. So, up until we see the lineup sheets, we really have no idea on either side who's going to be playing. This is the time we live in. So it's possible anything could happen, and they could have to play all the bench players or play a full strength squad. I mean, anything in between, we don't know until we get to that point. And that goes for both teams, obviously. And, it's a little bit unfair. I mean, obviously, the Crew won MLS Cup, even though they lost two of their starters on the eve of the game to positive COVID tests. So anything can happen, but it sucks that that's a factor in play here, that there's just so much uncertainty walking into a game if you're going to have your best players available or not. But we'll see. And then when it comes to Bradley Wright Phillips, he's the highest profile player who opted out after the contract option being declined. I don't necessarily blame him. I mean, I think he has to look out for himself, and it sounds like based on this, he's not coming back. I think when the contract option was declined, I think there was a chance that maybe he and LAFC could renegotiate and he could come back for 2021. I think this sort of indicates that the door is closed, that he's not going to be coming back. And that's a shame. I think he had a really good season. I definitely think LAFC would have brought him to CCL if he was willing, if he wanted to play. I think they would have counted on him. I think he would have likely gotten some playing time too. But I don't blame him either. I mean, I also understand from his perspective, wanting to look and the timing. That's where I think the CCL timing and the end of the MLS season being at the same time is really unfortunate, because there's, like this week, free agency is going to be starting. So he's going to be looking for his next team. Meanwhile, LAFC are still playing games. And so, something has to give. And I guess that's what happens. But without him, hopefully with Vela, Rossi, and Rodriguez available, looks like Musovski and Torres are also available. They've also done very well this season. Hopefully that will be sufficient in the CCL game in attack for LAFC.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. To me, I'm just surprised you had you had BWP who, obviously nothing was guaranteed for him when he first joined LAFC, but he's a player that proved himself. He's a player that impacted the game. He's a player. There was a couple games that they won because of him. He scored 8 goals. He had 6 assists. He started 14 games. So to me, I understand why BWP exited, but I also don't. On the other side, I don't understand why LAFC, because I think in this league you have a player that's a proven goal scorer, and regardless of his age, in 2020 and this year we live in, players are playing longer than if they take care of themselves, and he looks like he takes care of himself physically, right? So I think from what I'm understanding, LAFC, they're willing to roll the dice to get someone younger, but may not be a proven goal scorer yet. And I think this comes down to money, right? I think this may come down to money and what Bradley Wright Phillips wanted, and LAFC was not willing to do that. And I think we're gonna have to look at how this plays out for LAFC if Bradley Wright Phillips goes to a different club in the MLS and he's still effective, he's still scoring goals, he's still dominant, right? Whether he's a starter, whether he comes off the bench, at the end of the day, he's still a proven goal scorer at the age of 35, and you can't take that away from him. And it kind of also says to me, if you come to LAFC and with a 1 year contract with an option, even though you prove yourself, we may not pick up that option. You know what I'm saying? Like, so how there's going to be some uncertainty. I feel like from certain players that may recognize this or it may not bother them, but I think at the end of the day, you're letting someone walk away that is an actual threat in this league and revive his career within your program and your system. And if he goes elsewhere and does that, then I think people are going to look back at that. Do you feel the same way?
I see what you're saying, and I think it's a fair point, but I would say that every MLS team pretty much operates this way, right? Like job security in MLS is not really a thing. And so if you're not on a DP contract and playing well and in the good graces of your team, then anyone is really on the chopping block at any given time. I'm with you that I think BWP is a fantastic player. I think he brought a lot to this team. Like, let's not forget that this season, LAFC expected a healthy Carlos Vela throughout and a healthy Adama Diomande throughout. And Bradley Wright Phillips was kind of a flyer, right? Like, maybe he'll get a little bit of playing time or some rotation starts, that kind of thing. But I don't think he was expected to play as much as he did. And then he played a lot and he played really well. So I'm with you. I mean, I think it's a risk, certainly for LAFC to part ways with him. And he could very well come back to haunt them, down the line. But yeah, I mean, as far as kind of within standard operating procedure, I think in MLS, I don't think LAFC are doing anything really outside the norm for teams, but they may very well come to regret this eventually. We'll see.
Yeah, I don't think they're doing anything any other team would do, but I just think the fact that you have a proven goal scorer, and that's very hard to come by. And inside the box, and the way he scores goals, and then the way he impacts the game, I think that's why I'm a little bit more surprised. I think they might have looked at his age. They might have looked at like, hey, he may be asking way too much money than what we're willing to give. We have obviously Danny Musovski, but behind Danny Musovski, who do you really have when it looks like some of these players may not be back next season? And it was great to see what BWP did for LAFC. It's unfortunate that one, he didn't get a play in front of the 3252. He didn't get a play, in front of fans. And he's moving on, and it looks like he has played his final game for them. But one of the pickups that LAFC got, they ended up picking up Marco Fafan from the Portland Timbers. He's a left back. They got him in exchange for 300,000 and general allocation money. What would you make up of that pick? And we should also say that he's not available for them for the CCL matchup. This is a player they're going to have for next season.
Yeah, I think this is a good move. I know we found out about this trade a week or 10 days ago, so I think people have been kind of thinking it through for in the meantime before it came down officially. To me, he's a player with a lot of upside. I think he has a lot of potential. He's young. He has a lot of room for growth. And I think the biggest thing here is that the Portland Timbers have done a terrible job of playing young players and bringing through homegrowns and actually like giving them playing time and really developing them. I think the current coach, Gio Garcia, has done the best job in club history, in the MLS club history. And even he, I don't think, has really made full use of playing young guys and giving them a real chance. So I think if people look at the numbers that Farfan has put up so far in his career and sort of been like, he never became a regular starter. He doesn't even start all that many games. Is he really any good? I think more than any other team in MLS, I would definitely give those numbers a grain of salt because he was playing for the Timbers, and the Timbers just really don't give young players a chance, or young domestic players a chance. So in that way, I think it's a low risk, high reward kind of pickup. Like if he turns out to be a backup, then that's something that they could use. They could use somebody because he can play on both the left and the right side. LAFC can obviously use a player like that in fullback. And then if he turns out to be a starter, then I think 300,000 is going to be a bargain. So it's something that I think there's a lot of potential. If he doesn't end up being a starter, I think he can still be a useful piece. But I think if he becomes a starter, then this is like a no-brainer kind of thing. And I wouldn't be shocked if his game really elevates because he's going to be playing for a coach who not only gives young players a chance, but really wants to develop the young players and see them improve. I mean, Bob Bradley wants to see every player improve and really works to that end. So this could be a really good opportunity for Farfan to, actually blossom in his career and really show what he can do moving forward. So to me, this is a pretty exciting move.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's going to add depth. He's listed as a left back, but you just mentioned he can play the right back. I think to me, there's still questions on the right back. We saw Eddie Segura play that right back. It looks like Bob Bradley really likes Tristan Blackman at center back, and I think that's his best position. I don't see Tristan Blackman playing on the right back. I think he gets beat there too many times. But if you do have, say, moving forward, Eddie Segura, Jesus Mourinho, who they're still negotiating his contract, Tristan Blackman, whether it's Chiqui Palacios or Marco Farfan moving forward, I think you're adding more pieces to the puzzle on that end. But I also think you still need to add more pieces on the defensive end, more pieces like something like a Marco Farfan. Obviously we know Andy Nahar is not coming back, and we know that he had way too many injuries, and that was also a gamble with him, and obviously that didn't work out for them. And I think we see a lot of these moves with LAFC. We saw the move with BWP. I feel like at the start of the season he was like a low risk, high reward. He ended up being a high reward, and and it obviously ended up going the other way. But I think you start adding more of those pieces. And I don't think you have to go that far from the MLS to pick up defenders. I feel like one thing that MLS produces is defenders, right? That's one of the things that the league is known for. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do try to get more players like this. One name that's been rumored around is Paul Aguilar, former Aguilas right back. He's out of contract. I believe he's 34 years old. From what I was reading online, he's come up as a top candidate for LAFC. It was between LAFC, Austin FC, the new expansion club, and it looks like LAFC's number one. What do you make of that Paul Aguilar rumor?
I think that would, if it actually came to fruition, that would be sort of an Andy Nahar style, more of an Andy Nahar style signing. It would be somebody who could potentially, if he comes good right away, could really help you very quickly in the short term. But obviously, at his age, you're not going to be building around him, for the long term. But if LAFC sort of look at what they have right now, if Rossi and Rodriguez and other players don't necessarily get sold in the winter, I think LAFC could look at sort of the pieces that they have and say, okay, we've got a really good core together. This is our last chance. Then you could maybe see a situation where they roll the dice on an aging fullback like Aguilar. And, he's somebody who's a really good two-way player too. Like he's been a really good scorer from his position in his career. And that's something that obviously I think would fit in with LAFC's style. But we'll have to see what happens. I mean, I don't necessarily know if the price point that he would come in at would really make any sense for LAFC. If they're rejecting paying Bradley Wright Phillips, then are they going to really pony up probably a lot more for someone like Paul Aguilar? But it's an intriguing player, but we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. I think Austin FC has more money because they're an expansion club to offer that to Paul Aguilar. And I do think it will come down to the money and the incentives, or unless he's excited just to play with Carlos Vela and be in LA, and he's willing to take less money. But I think when you're coming when you come from a different league in LigaMX, you're trying to get as much money as you can, especially at that age. So, well, I'm interested to see how far this goes and how interested LAFC are, because, like you said, he's not a player that essentially they're gonna be able to build around maybe 1 or 2 years, and that may be it. But do you really want to offer him, say, TAM type of money? Do you really want to offer him, more than what I think 600,000? I don't know if they're willing to dish that out. The good thing for LAFC, he's out of contract. He'll be a free transfer. They could potentially do a 1 year deal with them and just roll the dice, or they may just look elsewhere. Like I said, but I do think that's intriguing that rumor came up, because he does kind of fit their style, playing that 4-3-3. He's explosive off the back. Obviously, he's older, but he's able to play in that. You would assume he would be able to play in Bob Bradley's system. Let's talk about the players you just mentioned. Diego Rossi, Brian Rodriguez, maybe even a Tuesta. Um, the winter window is coming up. I believe it's January 5th. So there's been a lot of rumors with Brian Rodriguez. We'll start with him first. Well, there's been a lot of rumors from his agent publicly wanting to get him to Europe, right? And just as any agent, but he's been the most vocal. We haven't really heard anything about Diego Rossi's agent, being in the South American media, when Rossi has been the best player for LAFC out of those two, right? I understand that Brian Rodriguez plays for the national team. He's made it. He's made it. He gets to start. But to me, even watching him in the national team, he's not as effective as Diego Rossi from what I've seen. And I think, to me, Rossi right now has impacted games more, and the way Uruguayan players that I've seen, grow up and everything, Brian Rodriguez has lacked in the way you impact the game. Whether, they win because of his assist, they win because of his goal, or they win because he was involved in that play. Within the time I've seen with LAFC, he hasn't shown that. And not saying that he's not capable of doing that, but I think he does still have a lot of great years ahead of him. But I don't know if it was, maybe he doesn't feel comfortable in the system or whatever it is, but he's still a valuable player for LAFC, and he's still a valuable player on the international market. Do you think he's going to move this winter?
I mean, it's really hard to say. I just really don't have a sense of what the transfer market is going to look like. I honestly think that a lot of teams are going to play it safe and be really conservative. And so I think it's also going to bring down the value of transfers overall. And so does that affect a transfer like Rodriguez's or Rossi's, players who are not going to be $50 million players? They're going to, be considerably less, but our team's going to be willing to spend that much. At the same time, maybe because the high-end players are going to be out of reach, and teams are not going to want to spend that much money, they may go for more budget players, like the Uruguayans and that kind of thing, and take a few more flyers, I guess, in terms of their winter transfer strategy. So, I think one of the things too is in MLS, we always say, oh, this guy is destined for a move. He's about to move. It's going to happen. And it usually happens considerably later than we expect. And I think we're probably nearing a point where Rossi and Rodriguez are going to be moving on in the next couple transfer windows. And maybe because of COVID and the ongoing issues and disruptions that's causing, that could delay their move even more. So I would give it probably like a 40% chance that they'll go. It's there's a good possibility, but I don't necessarily think it's definitely happening. It's for
Mhm.
sure thing. Like, it's never a for sure thing. And I think at this time in particular, it's just really uncertain what teams in domestically are doing, what teams abroad are doing. And so I don't know if we can really say, with authority that, oh, Brian Rodriguez's agent is really shopping him in the press. That means he's definitely moving on. And maybe the agent's working hard, but may not be getting a lot of traction. So we'll see.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I think how aggressive his agent has been. If Rodriguez was tearing up the league, it's a no-brainer, right? So I think potentially to us, it's like, if he was tearing up the league, okay, bam, yeah, he gets sold. but I think the way he has played, and obviously we don't know how much they track him. Obviously he does have that, that national stage with the Uruguayan national team, but even then, you're playing with different high quality players that you would assume he's going to be able to get there, and I do feel like Brian Rodriguez will be able to reach those heights, but if he's not able to do it in the MLS, to me, it's a little concerning because MLS, outside of all the other leagues, assumed to be the easier ones out of Europe and all these different things, right? And it may just be a system fit. It may come down to that, but I think if it doesn't happen this transfer window, it's obviously going to happen more in the summer window. And the LAFC has also showed that they're not if they're not willing, if they're not going to get what they want, they have no rush and want to sell a player, to shout a player, even if he may be happy or not. We saw what happened with Latif Blessing, that he wasn't happy with his contract situation. He was pushing to go to Brazil, but it didn't financially make sense for LAFC. And we also had Rodriguez. There were rumors about him in the previous transfer window, but LAFC wasn't getting what they wanted out of him, and they know how much value they have. So we may see Rodriguez for another year. I think the player that I'm more interested is Diego Rossi. He's definitely, he's winning the goal. He won the Golden Boot in Orlando, won the Golden Boot this year, even missing, a number of games because of international call-ups. And I do think he is the more likely to leave this winter ahead of Brian Rodriguez, just because of the noise he's made. Um, what do you think of Rossi's play this year, and what do you think about him potentially leaving?
Well, Rossi's been fantastic. I mean, he's been the best player in on LAFC, and I was surprised at how high he ended up finishing in the MVP race. I think he was second. I didn't even vote for him second in the MVP, so I was a little bit surprised. But no, he's been really outstanding. Every year he's played in MLS, he's elevated his game, and this was the year when Carlos Vela went down, and Rossi picked up the slack, and he really was fantastic. I do disagree with you, though, as far as which player I think is going to go first. I think Rodriguez is more likely to go first because he has that track record with the Uruguayan national team. And I just think that teams in Europe take that probably a little more seriously than maybe sometimes they should. And since Rossi didn't get on the field, even though he got called up at the end of the year, he didn't get on the field for Uruguay's senior national team yet. So I think he needs to make his debut, not fall flat on his face, which I don't think he would on the international front. And if he gets a few minutes under his belt, then I think a team's going to snap him up in pretty short order. But, obviously we don't know. I think I'm with you. I think on the balance of play, Rossi deserves to get a move because I think he's just been outstanding, and he's clearly the best young player in MLS. He's like I said, he's gotten better every single season. I don't see any sign of that slowing down. But I still think that the lure for teams abroad, and I think a lot of teams abroad still don't do a very good job even watching MLS. So to an extent, I find Rodriguez's struggles could be irrelevant for a buying team. There are teams who do their due diligence and do watch the tape on the players that they're going to be signing, and there's others who frankly don't. They look at the numbers. Oh, look at how many goals he scored for his national team already. He's barely played, but he's getting regular run. Yep, sign him up. Oh, his assists look pretty good for MLS. So, and MLS sucks. Whatever. Like, boom, we got this deal. So yeah, I think obviously there's a lot of factors in play, but to me, I still think that Rodriguez, being a regular already on the national team, still makes him more of an asset for probably most teams. And then Rossi, I think once he actually starts getting called up and making appearances, I think that's going to boost his transfer value substantially. And I think the whole gamble with LAFC letting him go on international duty, even though he's not playing, I think that'll pay off, when they actually do get the transfer, because them letting him go to be part of Uruguay, whether or not he plays, whenever he finally starts playing, it's going to show that they were willing to work with the national team program and getting him acclimated. and then that's going to pay off when they actually get the transfer fee.
Yeah, no, yeah, I'm with you. I think the one league or that does pay attention to the MLS or to American players is the Germans. You know, and I think I could see Rossi going there if they are paying attention to what's going on in the MLS. I feel like they do. Um, but I also wouldn't be surprised if Rodriguez leaves first. But I think if you're really paying attention to the MLS and you see the noise that Rossi has been doing, not just for LAFC, but all over the league, I think he has the more value. I was looking at transfer market. Obviously, it's just transfer market. It's not anything. I just want to be clear. But he was closer to $20 million. We've seen how the players move, and I think if leagues around the world are actually paying attention to what's going on and they are seeing the value of American players, how they've been successful. Also, MLS players. Obviously, you got a unicorn like Alfonso Davies. You also got players like that Reggie Canyon, who I think he's playing now in Portugal, and then he's moving up. So I think there is leagues out there that are paying attention and they are noticing. I think you also see Rossi's age. I think he's 22, 23. I think that has a lot. And also being in a big market, so I think it's going to be very interesting to see who goes first. If it's Brian, then obviously they're not paying attention, or his value of playing with the national team, like you said,
Yeah.
is more important to the team. So I'm excited to see which one of those two players ends up moving first. And I'll be texting you and be like, you know what? You're right. They don't pay attention. So the value of the national team is more important, which I agree. I agree. You play for Uruguay, it just puts you up there. And there's just so many things that just being for Uruguay and being, because essentially it's like a boys club to make it and play in that team. So there's so much value just all over the world for Rodriguez. Another player is Eduardo Tuesta. Obviously this year he had an injury. I believe it was at the Orlando tournament. He was very solid for them up until that. Then he had to recover. He was out for a couple months. What do you think about him? Obviously we know what he can do, but this year, just like Carlos Vela and LAFC, was not their best year.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's also a player who should be a transfer asset potentially for LAFC and somebody who should be getting a look in Europe. But it's a little bit harder, frankly, to kind of pin what kind of team would be interested in him. I think in part just because of his position. It's a much more subtle position. You're not sort of looking at the box score and saying, oh, they scored this many goals and this many assists, so that's easy to kind of calibrate. When it's a midfielder who is mostly kind of just playing a two-way game, you don't get the same kind of sense of, oh, this guy is worth this much. And obviously on a team, it's you need all kinds of players, including somebody like Atuesta, and he's really been fantastic. I think probably this rough season for him and LAFC overall. I don't think he played badly this season, but
Mhm.
just the team struggles. Like you said, he was injured and out for a little bit. I think that probably put him behind a little bit in terms of transfer timeline. But I think teams that are doing their homework and paying attention really should be paying attention to him, because he's really, I think when he's playing really well, then you can tell the team overall is really elevated. And when he's struggling, they really get bogged down in the midfield and they're unable to kind of boss the midfield. And I think for this team to really work right, their midfield needs to be working at its best. And so when he's around and he's playing at his best, like you can tell just by the sense of the game, the influence that he's having on it. So yeah, I mean, I like him a lot. I think he also should be meriting some transfer interest, but it's a lot harder to say for someone in his position, just because, like I said, his skill set is a lot more subtle. It's harder to quantify than it is for the other players. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, no, I think it's gonna be interesting what happens with all the players being rumored, and even the players that they're still negotiating with, the Jesus Mourinho, which I looked into the numbers initially. What it was, 300,000 upfront, and then a loan option to buy for 1 million. And I think from what I hear, it's LAFC is trying to negotiate that 1 million down. So I don't know how likely that's going to happen, but those were the contract negotiations. So we'll see what happens there. I'm also very interested to see if Danny Masewski plays this Wednesday against Cruz Azul, because he didn't play the last couple of games for LAFC. He didn't play against the Seattle Sounders, and he didn't play against the Portland Timbers, obviously due to his injury, which I don't even remember what it is now, because I don't think they've told us, or what happened, but it looks to be a lot more serious because he's been out for so long. Um, I think he's a great player. He's definitely impacted. They're definitely gonna need him, especially if BWP is not there, and we don't know. Obviously, as of now, Rossi's and Rodriguez, situation. We know Carlos Vela can play there as a striker. What do you think about Danny Masewski, how he played this year, and what do you think about moving forward?
I think he was a big surprise. I think, I mentioned earlier that the team, I think, was counting on Diamande to play major minutes, and obviously that didn't work out this season for several reasons. I think they expected BWP to play a fair amount, and then I think beyond that it was, Vela, Rossi, and Rodriguez, and so there wasn't really going to be a lot of daylight for a player like Masovsky. Of course, as the season, turned out to be, there was a bunch of injuries, departures, and then the absolute fixture congestion that the team dealt with in the second half of the year. And he was a big surprise. I think he was kind of come in as somebody to do a shift in training, come off the bench a bit, and whatever, see what happens. I think he definitely exceeded expectations. He scored 5 goals, contributed to a couple wins for LAFC. Like, he scored a couple garbage time goals, but he also scored a couple of key goals in key games to win. So it was really a pretty good season for him, and a big surprise, and I think a pretty savvy pickup for LAFC. Is the second USL player that they've signed who's turned out to be really, really good. Obviously, Mark Anthony Kaye was the first. So if they can pick up a player like that every couple of years, a USL player who hasn't gotten a fair shake in MLS or hasn't gotten a look at all so far, and then bring them through and see what they can do and get something out of them, and that's pretty good for them. But I think Danny's been a really good story. I expect they're going to expect him to get even better next year. And if he can, then, if players leave or if they get hurt again, then they won't be scrambling as much, when those situations happen. But yeah, it's a pleasant surprise. And then for Champions League, I think it depends on the game state. I think if it's a really tight game and it's late and Bob feels like his starters can go, maybe Danny won't come off the bench. But I think if he does opt to go for his bench, then I think Danny's going to be one of the first players he brings off. So we'll see.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think I'm with you. I think he's been an exciting player. Obviously, he got the player option. BWP didn't get the player option. He looks to be the obviously in their future, and he would also be more less expensive than BWP, right? So I see that makes sense. And just talking to Danny, he has the type of mindset, the type of mentality that I kind of want to say like a killer. Like he doesn't. He's not like overly like confident, but he backs up what he says, and he's a worker. He puts in the work, and because you put in the work, that's how you build confidence. And you see it on the field. He's not afraid of anybody. He's not afraid of playing anybody, but he also backs up his game, and he doesn't really need he doesn't need to be out there talking and doing anything. He's just a player that comes in, plays, puts in the work in practice, puts in the work in the off season. And like you said, he didn't get a fair shake with San Jose, who that drafted him, but he came. I think he also matured within the USL, gave him some time to develop, and now with LAFC, obviously one of the biggest clubs in MLS, he's proven it. He got that player option, so his confidence is even going to grow even more. I just hope with whatever injury he's dealing with, it doesn't see he's able to play this game, or if not, then it's definitely a lot more serious, and they're gonna have to hold on to him till March or whenever the season resumes moving forward, because he's definitely a player for their future, and for that's going to play that striker role if Vela is not playing that striker role. And and very interesting to see what the lineup looks moving forward. Because even just to go back to Brian Rodriguez, he didn't start the last game he played for them. Christian Torres, 16-year-old, started him, and then Brian Rodriguez came off the bench. So I'm very very interested to see what lineup he puts out there. I think we can almost kind of predict what the back line is going to be without some of these players being out there. Also the midfield. It's going to be an exciting matchup for LAFC, and if they are able to move forward, or if not, if they may just be a one and done situation for them. It's been a crazy year. So let's talk about that. If they move forward and say they make it all the way, and they end up somehow winning the CCL championship. Is this going to be something to look back on, like, okay, we didn't have the best MLS season, but we won the CCL, so that is like a great way to end the year, but not the way we wanted to end the MLS season. Do you think that that's above the MLS because they would potentially be the first MLS team to win the CCL?
I don't know if it'd be above MLS, but it would. I think if they won the CCL, it would definitely be a successful season, even if the MLS season was a disappointment. Just because it's kind of a holy grail for MLS teams. There's been several at this point who've gotten to the final and then fallen short. So the first team that actually would make it and win, and we should say there's several other MLS teams who are still in the competition too at this point. So there's several teams that could potentially win. It would be a huge deal. And I think for LAFC, I was thinking about it because based on the way that the season shook out and the fact that there wasn't US Open Cup and, stuff like that, the Champions League slots, obviously LAFC will not be in Champions League next year, right? Like regardless of what happens, even if they won the Champions League this year, they will not be in Champions League next year. And it hadn't dawned on me until I started reading about the
Because of
various.
their MLS season, right? Is that based because of their
Right.
MLS?
Well,
Okay.
the way they hand out MLS or US soccer hands out the berths for CCL, they just don't qualify, under any of the ways that they're giving them out. The MLS Cup winner, the opposite conference winner, all that kind of stuff. It's just not going to happen. So this is like sort of you got to give it your best shot now because it's going to be at least a year before you're in again. And so it's an opportunity that you really can't pass up. Like teams can't take for granted that they're going to be in CCL. You have to take the moment when you have it and do your best. And obviously it's hard. LigaMX has completely dominated the competition. MLS has perpetually been at a disadvantage. But the fact that this is being played at the end of the year, I think should help MLS teams a lot. And so this is the time when they have to actually show it. Like, okay, we're on a more equal playing field with MLS teams not able to complain about the schedule this time around and the timing of when CCL is being played. Great. Now you have to actually perform and show that it's time that you can actually with a more level playing field, you can compete and actually win and advance and that kind of thing. So it's a long road for LAFC, even though it's only 3 games, right? Like if they beat Cruz Azul, they would likely play Club America in the semifinal. And if they somehow beat Club America, I believe it's Tigres would likely, there's a good chance they play Tigres in the final. That's a murderer's row, frankly.
Yeah.
So even if the field is a little more level at this point, it's going to be tough. But I think you have to take it one game at a time. If LAFC made it to the semifinals, I still think it would be a pretty successful season for them. Making it to the semifinals of the CCL in your first go around, that's impressive. And potential, if they did that, they would have beaten 2 LigaMX teams, including the league champion this year.
Yeah.
That would be impressive. If they can make it to the final, it's icing on the cake, right? And if they can win it, then obviously it would be a huge accomplishment. And the disappointing MLS season, I think, would have to be in the rear view because it would be a huge accomplishment, even if it's only a 5-game tournament ultimately for them. Still, you got to play these really good teams to win. So it's scary. It's exciting. It's the kind of games that you want to be in if you want to be a big club. So
and we've seen in these tournaments, if you're a team that can get hot, especially in these knockout rounds, I mean that can just take you all the way to the final, right? If you have the momentum. But at the same time, we've seen LAFC not have the best success in these knockout rounds, right? We see, obviously, we just saw it just recently against Seattle Sounders, against the MLS Cup, or the MLS Cup, this tournament, MLS is back tournament, I guess, this summer. So I think this is a great opportunity for them to overcome that, because you want to be able to overcome that, and they haven't been able to overcome that in their short, in their short history, to make it to a final as of yet. They're very short, but they have so much talent. So it's gonna be exciting. I know we're all gonna be tuning in to see what's gonna happen with LAFC. It seems everything to be breaking their way with the struggles of Cruz Azul. But then again, I mean, this is still a team. This is still a solid Mexican team from the LigaMX that still has a lot to fight for, especially the way that they went out. I'm also interested to see how motivated some of the LAFC players are, and especially with the 2020 year that's been going on. Not saying that they don't want to compete or anything, but like I said, you got to get away from your family. Maybe that helps you focus a little bit more. Or if some players already like, let's get this game over with, this tournament over with, and let's move on to 2021. But if they somehow are able to get over Cruz Azul, then you start, okay, then you start believing, and then it gets more and more exciting. But yeah, but Alicia, that is it. That's all the time we have. Is there anything you want to add before we leave?
No, like you said, it's been the longest year, and it's almost over. But yeah, it's pretty interesting to have some soccer to cap everything off here. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, no, it's exciting here. Wednesday, December 16th. So, obviously, we hope the best for LAFC, and they're able to overcome Cruz Azul, because that'd be an exciting time, and just to keep our attention, and still watching a team from LA move forward. For the people that already don't follow you, let them know where they can follow you at.
Sure. I work for SB Nation. I work for several sites there. I cover LAFC for Angels on Parade. You can find me on Twitter at Soccer Musings.
Yep. Guys, definitely read articles. Great content. She puts out great content on all the Southern California teams. Awesome job she does, and also a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Guys, if you guys enjoyed this podcast, make sure to give this a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. You can listen to this podcast wherever you get your music. You can follow me at Gio Garcia LA on Twitter. You can also check us out at LA Soccer Hub on all social media platforms. For Alicia, this is Gio. We'll catch you guys next time. Peace.